So hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us at the Mac Venture Capital Founder Salon. Just a little background, these sessions were intended to be in person, like 25 to 30 person dinners, people dinners, and, where we'd invite industry experts like we have today and just talk about what's going on in their industry, where we see innovation happening and where we see opportunities. But given the current situation, we moved it to kind of a web format so we can accommodate even more of you. We'll record this and share it more broadly afterwards. But I wanted to just take a minute to thank our esteemed panel for joining us today. And just by way of introduction, we have Sheeny Wark, who's the Chief Revenue Officer at Riff. We have Charles King, who is the founder and CEO of Macro, and also one of the general partners at our firm, Mac. And then last but certainly not least, my brother, Steve Pammon. Steve is the president and chief operating officer at Parkwood Entertainment. Maybe we can start off, I'll just kind of go around the room, round robin, and you can talk about the platforms that you're representing today. Charles, let's pivot over to you and talk about Macro. What is Macro?
So Macro is a multi-platform media company that we launched 5.5 years ago that focuses on financing, producing film, television experiences, digital content that are for and by people of color. And we also, as you mentioned, I'm the general partner, and we're affiliated with Mac Venture Capital.
Awesome. And then Steve, Parkwood Entertainment, Beyonce. Tell us about what's going on over there.
Yeah, so Parkwood is the holding company for Beyonce's business and creative interests. We sort of divide the business up along 4 lines. We have a record company, which is independent, which obviously Beyonce is a part of. Chloe and Halle, who shameless plug, their second album is out on Friday. So I'm very excited about that, along with Ingrid and a few other artists, including the Carters too, by the way, Jay-Z and Beyonce when they perform as a group. We have a touring business where we've put on a variety of shows. But the biggest ones we've been known for have been Beyonce's last few stadium shows and her Coachella performance. We have a business ventures entity where it's a holding umbrella for all of our business partnerships, which range from smaller ones like Watermelon Water to large ones like Ivy Park, Adidas. And then last but not least, we have a company that provides services and production. So we produce all of the films and music videos that B is a part of, and Chloe and Halle directly. So we just came off a Grammy win for Homecoming for Best Music Film. We did Lemonade. We've done the Ape Shit video and about 24 other projects. So between sort of video, business, touring, and music, we're just a full service arm for whatever her vision is.
Charles, so in the spirit of doing things differently as we're doing here today, the movie theaters shut down, right? And we've seen some studios go direct to over the top or streaming platforms like Trolls and some others, and they've seen some really nice success with that. What are your thoughts in terms of movie theaters coming back and content producers and creators like yourselves opting to skip the theater and go directly to streaming?
Well, yeah, the industry was obviously experiencing its a period of tremendous change with all of the new streaming platforms, obviously led by Netflix, and then soon to follow with Amazon, Hulu, Apple, then Disney Plus, HBO Max. where there's definitely, there's so many outlets that are now competing for the attention, the time of an audience and a viewer. They're in gaming platforms, they're on social media. So the bar was already getting to a place that was already very elevated to eventize going to see a movie and having that experience together at one time in the theater. I think that there will always be a place for experiencing those eventized movies, particularly when we get on the other side of COVID-19. I think that just like people gather to see, Beyonce in concert with it, although there's no experience quite like that. I was there at Beychella. Nothing can compare to that. How incredible that was. But still, the human connection of going on a date, going out, going to a movie and grabbing a dinner afterwards, people are going to still do that. And I think that the bar between projects that are going to be theatrically distributed widely on a global level versus some that can be experienced at home on a streaming platform, they're just going to be different. There's going to be more options, but there will still be a marketplace for that. I'm very excited to see what happens in July, to see if the Chris Nolan movie starring John David Washington and how well that will do when it's theatrically released in July. And they're definitely charging forward with that. I know that Marvel has a big event movie coming out in the fall, Black Widow, I believe. And so it's going to be interesting to see. I think that you've read polls and we've seen the statistics out there where I think 70% of those polled would say that right now, with COVID-19 still out in the marketplace, without there being a cure, without there being a vaccine, that people are going to be hesitant about going to a theater. But I think just like what we've seen as states have been opening up, as I and millions of others have been out there protesting, that people are going to get out there. And so I think that now that the test is more readily available, I think we will see people. And there will eventually be that time when we have that, where there is a vaccine. And I think there will still be a theatrical movie going business. It may not be as robust as it once was, but I think there will still be a business. And so I think the smart companies like Macro are ones that are going to be, have a well-rounded portfolio. You have, these are my projects that are going to be with streaming platforms. These are the ones that I'm going to finance and produce for a widely distributed theatrical marketplace. And then here are the smaller indie ones that could get picked up out of a festival that can go in either direction. And so, but that's my sense of where I think the market is going.
Okay, so it'll be more of a hybrid and case by case based on the movie and the studio.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, Steve, we'll jump over to you real quick. Let's get into the music. So my limited understanding of the music industry is that artists typically make money by record sales, streaming, YouTube, touring, and merchandising. And touring being the kind of the bringing in the lion's share of the revenue. If that's correct, and given that during these times there's not a lot of touring going on, what are artists doing to kind of make up for that kind of revenue shortfall?
Well, I think it's two things. I think one, just to make it simple, we operate on a 4-box quadrant mentality, which is, frankly, something I adopted from the NFL, which is, you make money, to your point, through direct sales of media, you make money through merchandise, you make money through sponsorships or partnerships, and then you finally make money through touring. And so, from us perspective is no different than a sports team in the sense that Charles hit the nail on the head. You never want to have your portfolio too unbalanced. And I think one of the things that I would remind everyone is that we spoke about this sort of pre-meeting, time sort of is distorted now. So when people say, what are artists doing? I think the reality of it is, remember, they're only 90 days into something that if we would have talked about in January, there were gigantic tours being planned. Lady Gaga, Justin Bieber,
Mhm.
the Rolling
Mhm.
Stones. They were not only planning tickets, they sold tickets in January. So I think, it's TBD to answer your question, what artists are really going to be doing, because most of that money was planned to hit this summer. So no one's really
Right.
lost a lot, right?
Mm.
I think in theory, we imagine we've lost, a ton, but the
Mhm.
reality of the situation, and it's been very disappointing, is how drastic the fall has been predicted to be
Mhm.
versus how drastic it really is,
Mm.
right? And so there's a lot of fascination with I call the acute changes, but the reality of it is it's a very slow drip. And the positive of it, and at least as I see it, is that people are concerned about, hey, well, wait a minute, what if, to Charles's point, touring doesn't come back in a huge way until mid 2021 or 2022. Right now is the time to be thinking about what those alternative business models and plans should be. And I'm seeing a lot of that. To be
Mhm.
candid, I love what's happening with the Verses
Yeah.
on Instagram. I think that's kindled a lot of not only demand for that experience, as Charles mentioned, but frankly for artists, right?
Yeah.
Just empirically, the biggest versus battle was Teddy Riley and Babyface.
Oh yeah.
If I had, as a tour promoter, told you the biggest tour in January pre-COVID would be Teddy Riley and Babyface, I would have been met with some skepticism. Now I'm pretty confident that if anybody was to go out and promote that tour, let alone myself, there would be a lot of demand for it. And so I think in some ways you never want to ascribe any positivity out of a pandemic. That's
Mhm.
self-explanatory. But there are some externalities that came from that, to your point, Marlon, in that it's pushing people to say, well, what about digital? What about, a quasi-virtual experience? What about rekindling the smaller touring experience? Maybe, touring will come back and it will favor artists that have an intimate room versus a giant stadium. Or maybe you can't have a big stadium or arena show, and you might only have festivals where everyone can spread out in the field and sort of picnic. Again, anybody that tells you they know, I think is being a little too ambitious with foretelling the future. But what I love is I love that the conversations are happening because again, maybe they're happening out of necessity, absolutely. But let's just say many of the conversations around touring in particular were very standard in January, where now I think they're very sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. Sheenie, are you back? Can we hear you?
I really hope so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
There we
Yeah.
thumbs
go.
up,
Hear you. All
thumbs
right.
up,
Rough
Cool.
start, but we're
crystal
back. All
clear.
right.
Awesome. So yeah, let's kind of cycle back and maybe tell us about what is Riff? What is that platform?
Yeah, so we are a dynamic integration platform. And what that means is that in current day, you have to shoot a product into content in order for it to appear there. What we can do is scan any content that's composited, mastered, finished post, 20 years old, whatever it is. So this includes library content for content owners, and look for flat surfaces and places we can place brands. So I think, coming out of the previous discussion where you were saying that these difficult times and recessions and force us to become innovative, it's actually, helped our business as well. In that everyone's moving to streaming. They have access to all this content. It's all at their fingertips. They're creating very personalized, on-demand experiences. And since they've moved away from linear and broadcast, now brands are having to change based on this media landscape. So TV advertising isn't performing the way it did. How now do we engage with audiences, especially younger ones, where this will only become more and more pronounced? And the way they're going to succeed is to be in the content. Before it was, very difficult logistically to execute anything, to get product to set, if it even made it into the final cut. What we can do now is scale that and say, okay, there are 10,000 integrations across these platforms that we could do for you this year. So there's a always on kind of strategy to it that they couldn't accomplish in the traditional ways that you do product placement. Got
it. Well, let's stick with you for a little bit, Sheeny, since we missed you for a while there. So I got an interesting stat, right? There are some, and you spoke a lot about kind of new content just now, right? Let's talk a little bit about existing content. So there's roughly 169,000 hours or 11 months of streamable content, available by the major players out there. How can you help brands or those content creators to derive value from existing, art or media?
Yeah, so what we're seeing, like even with Netflix, 8 of the top 10 shows are all back catalog. We've seen Friends bouncing around. We've seen Seinfeld bouncing around, because the content owners can really only get a licensing fee for this content. But the consumption or the minutes watched for those make up the bulk of the viewing minutes on these platforms. So they've kind of been unable to benefit from those huge viewerships or monetize it in any way. What we can do now is go through the episodes and say, oh, in this breakfast scene, we'll put a coffee at Brandon or whatever it might be at a desk. We might put a soda can on it. All those sorts of opportunities now for them to benefit from the brand integrations financially. So they share in the deal. The brand is the one that funds it. They come to us and say, this is who we want to reach. This is our budget. This is our time frame. We go to them with the opportunities. And then once that deal closes, it's a revenue share with the content owner. So they're finding new ways now, based on the size of these audiences, to actually benefit from it. And the same is in reverse too, like all these littler shows that are being discovered now that kind of all of a sudden explode, that didn't have an opportunity to benefit from brand integration because they weren't sure it was going to be a hit. Now they can, in hindsight, go back and monetize it.
Got it. Cool. So that's, it gets me thinking a little bit, and I want to bring Steve back in. Just thinking about music videos, and and how that part of the business works for the artist. And are there ways to do you do today, like integrate brand deals and things like that? And what does that process look like today? And is there an opportunity to do things kind of a new way in that part of the industry?
Well, I think I'd answer the question on two levels. One is the practical realities of brand integration with music videos, and the other is that what's the right artistic intention for those integrations. So your first part, really quickly, is that at the end of the day, most music videos are considered promotion. Right. So, separate out artistic films like Lemonade, which are, honestly, few and far between. But 99.9% of music videos are there to promote the song. And they're available on platforms generally for free. Apple's probably one of the few places of scale where you can purchase a music video. So what does that mean just from a business affairs perspective? Is that when you start talking about having your music video displayed on YouTube or other free platforms around the world, which I don't want to make it just US centric, when you integrate brands in there, so say for example, we wanted to integrate an Ivy Park, or let's take actually a real example, not a hypothetical one. You take Busta Rhymes' Pastor Cavassier with Pharrell and Puff. If you were doing that today, where you had to have that on YouTube, they would run into some pretty interesting problems, because even if they didn't get, which it turns out they didn't get compensated for that, it would be perceived potentially by YouTube and the algorithms as being advertising. And I tell people all the time, advertising very rarely begets other advertising. And so then, they might be in a situation where some platforms might close off the distribution of that, unless, and you've seen this, countless times, unless what happens is that somehow in post-production, those brands get sort of removed from the process. So even when, people are wearing clothing, for example, now in music videos, you'll see with the big artists, and again, not with every artist, because let's face it, like anything, it's all a matter of how much you want to police. But you'll see like the Polo Ralph Lauren's like being sort of, washed out, either pixelized or just removed, period, from the videos. You'll see Gucci, you see Hermès removed. And then sometimes people let it slide because, again, 80-20 rule. So that's the practical reality. And that's why you don't see, to be very candid, much integration there, is because it's sort of, again, it's one TV commercial integrated into another TV commercial. I think on the artistic side, one of the things that COVID has really brought to the forefront is the level of authenticity of connections. And I don't mean just connections brand to consumer. I'm talking about connections to one another, because people are really seeing sort of, what real really means. And I think that one of the challenges that many of the bigger artists are going to have with the brand integrations is that people are going to look and say, you know what, do you really do this? Or would you really have a Coca-Cola, for example, in this scene? Would you really have that? And if you really would, guess what's going to happen with the value? It's going to go way up. If you don't, there's going to be almost a cliff. And I really, truly think that that's a good thing for the business, to be very candid. But it's going to require some growing pains.
You wanna respond to that? I know you've been working with brands for a long time.
Yes.
I want an opportunity.
So I think part of the issue with music video is the condensed production timelines. They go from storyboards to shooting in a week, and then it gets posted a week after that. So brands have very extended sales cycles, and it takes them a long time to make up their mind. So we've had issues in terms of, in working with some of the music videos, with just the logistics of it. So what we can do, since we can put the brand in after it's shot, and sometimes that we still only have a week to do that, if there is a brand that's interested, we can still kind of take that money off the table for them. And because the way we do it is visual compute and AI and not traditional VFX, it really does only take us a couple days to do it. So we are starting to see more. I think, to your point, it is true. It does absolutely have to feel authentic and something that the artist would use. A lot of what you see in it is champagne or alcohol brands, the Dre headphones, those sorts of things.
Which represents something that many of the artists actually will use.
Yep, absolutely. And then, we were brought a video by Sony Music, and it was so clean and minimalist and futuristic looking. I was like, there's no way we'll mess it up if we put brands in it. Yeah. And I think, you have to put the art before commerce sometimes. And this is definitely a place where I'm not going to come in and turn your content into an ad. That's super important.
Yeah. Right. Charles, I'm going to jump back to you, but really quick to the audience, we're going to open up the chat function in a few minutes here. So if you have questions that you want to ask our panelists, please start to just put those in the chat, and we'll make sure we get it to them. So Charles, we talked about, studios offline. We talked about it. Studios not being able to be in production right now, right?
Yeah.
So films are paused. And I know that one division of Macro is managing talent, artists, writers, producers, etc. What's it looking like for them right now? And are there workarounds that you know of that are coming down the pike that will allow these studios to kind of get back to work in some form?
Yeah, no, it's actually, it's still, like I said, we were all conversing before we went live. It's actually, we were all conversing about how busy we all are in our respective businesses. And I have to tell you, man, we're talking 10 to 12 Zooms a day, because the amount of activity that continues to happen in spite of what's happening with COVID-19, where our team just jumped in and galvanized virtually. And I'll say that I've always been one who believes that when there's chaos, there's opportunity. And within the chaos of COVID-19 and disruption that has caused in the industry, frankly, it's been a time to level set and to move things forward. And as Steve mentioned earlier, I've been really inspired by some of the creative ways in which artists have been using this moment, like the Versus platform, what Erykah Badu did, during COVID-19 with, streaming directly from her bedroom, and then built out her own platform and is monetizing it. And then how ancillary merchandise is coming off of it. We were all inspired by what DJ D-Nice did one of those first few weekends, and the way he uplifted our entire culture, and his Instagram followers went from 200,000 to 2.3 million. I mean, he was so uniquely positioned. There's probably no one in the world who's as good as he is, who's just is tapped into the culture and the artist in a way. So that was just beautiful to see that. And then now how he's taken that. And so, during this time, the management vertical that we've launched, there's a group within that management vertical called Uncommon, where they represent social media influencers who are building their business and their brand off of their initial push from social media. And the different verticals at Macro, I mean, this is one that's profitable now, that is thriving and growing through all of this, where you've got artists, who are building out beauty brands, and they're connecting in with various brands. And it's been really interesting to see the growth of that vertical. But another area, frankly, has been the platforms are all still in a streaming war, where they're all kind of battling for potential viewers and to build subscriber growth. And they recognize that that's all going to be about their content ecosystem. And so they've been acquiring stories. I mean, even just through this period, we've set up at least 4 movies, 2 television shows with Macro as a studio during the middle of COVID-19. And I know that artists, and I talk to my friends who are in agencies and management companies, they're similarly positioned, where writers are able to write now. And so, and there's virtual writers rooms going, setting up the next season of all of these shows. We have 2 virtual writers rooms going, Raising Dion season 2, which was our, one of our shows, which was a successful Netflix, and another show, Hentified. And we have actually a 3rd writers room is about to get going virtually on a new show that we're going to launch. And that's in addition to everything else. So I think that this is that time for where people are creating. There's artists that we don't know about yet, who are literally using this moment, who are inspired by what's happened and using this moment to create. And then we're going to see, I think, new forms of storytelling and stories that we haven't even seen before that are going to be just extraordinarily compelling. And so I think that there are innovative business practices and stories that are going to come out of this. And so, we're just seeing that people are being robust, but they're also strategizing on where the business is going to go in the future. And then also 2 other things like gaming, like in the culture right now, when Travis Scott showed up in Fortnite, and it just set the world on fire. we're going to see more things like that and connectivity around. And I know, Marlon, I know that, you know, both Cross Culture and Mac are heavily invested in the gaming arena. I think we're going to see gaming connecting in with culture in ways that we haven't seen before, and things that have been that came about and seeds that were planted during the middle of this chaos of COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. All right. I'm going to pull a question. Let's see. Yeah. If you were going to start a new company today at the intersection of media and tech, what would it be? Just go around. Whoever wants to pick it up first.
Wow, that's interesting. Boy, that's a very interesting question. A few things stumped me. Let me throw an idea, not necessarily through. I think what Charles hit on with the intersection of live events and gaming, you know, really excites me. My 10-year-old, you know, scary to say, he hadn't heard of Travis before. My 17-year-old, you know, obviously is huge Travis Scott fan, and you know, Travis did Coachella when we were there, and you know, I know his people very well. But I was shocked that, you know, my son, again, his fourth grade class, they're all virtual. They not only, you know, really enjoyed the Fortnite piece, they are now singing Sicko Mode and all the rest of the songs as if they just came out. And, you know, me and my 17-year-old, we just sort of shake our heads at this. But I think there's something about going where the audience is. What he did perfectly in that, which would be the company I'd love to see, is he integrated the experience of a live show into Fortnite. I actually was there and played along with it, to the point we were flying around chasing him. I don't know if people saw it.
Yeah.
So this wasn't just about, okay, let me just do the show and it's within Fortnite. It was really organically part of that world. And, you know, if I could create the Live Nation within the world of Overwatch, Fortnite, etc., you know, I'd do it tomorrow. I just don't know how to do it. So if any of you guys know how to do it, you know,
we'll talk
really,
afterwards.
And that's for real, because I also believe the kind of company I want to start, and I'll let the other panelists say it, is the kind of company where, particularly as young people of color, you can have someone to catch your back and invest in a crazy idea. I always wanted to be, and you guys are movie fans. If you remember the movie Strictly Business, which was a movie done by my mentor, you know, Andre Harrell, the characters I always wanted to be in that movie was the O'Halloran brothers, which me and my college roommate, we said that's what we want to be. We want to be the guys in the back of the club that when you were in trouble, you went to and said, okay, this is the idea. This is who was going to back you. And we felt like that was power. And so, you know, I would love to do what you guys are doing with Mac and Charles. What you're doing overall, like, just is amazing to me. And I want to give you your flowers while you're here, because you guys are setting it up. So not only we can have this dialogue, but so we could have these kind of companies. So I'm very impressed.
It's an important mission for sure. Definitely hat tip to the whole team at Macro. Anyone else with thoughts? What would you build?
Yeah, it's a hard one. I think to build on the Travis Scott thing, because I was at Twitch for 6 years, so I was living the live streaming gaming world. And he did, when he went on with Ninja, or it was Little Yachty went on with Ninja, and then we started to see this cross-cultural thing where celebrities, influencers, social media, there's this convergence now of voices where it was so separate. Even when you look at TV shows now, big movie stars will do a TV show, and it wasn't before, and it's just all collided. And this doesn't really answer your question at all. But I do think that there's something to that virtual interactive experience. And the interactivity of gaming makes it so engaging. And so brands or anyone who wanted to sponsor it, all they're trying to figure out now is how to engage with people. because everybody's tuning everything out. They have their phone in one hand and the screen on, and they're listening to something else. That's engaging. That's immersive. They are 100% focused on that experience. And so how do we then somehow from that build out some sort of a tech or a business to manage those events?
It's going to sound like we're all in a similar thoughts here. I'd say there's two areas. I'm not sure what it is, but the understanding culture infused with data and analytics, who really knows something that merges that in a way that's unparalleled. And then I'd say the second thing of gaming, whether it's live events, whether it's a publisher, but something that merges the two in a way that we haven't not yet seen. I was really impressed. There's a team of 3 brilliant women who have this gaming studio who are doing the Insecure game. I was really impressed by them, and I can imagine we see more companies like that are on the precipice, just like the renaissance we've seen in filmmaking and television now with the culture. You got to find more of us in that gaming space that we know how robust it is. I can only imagine the valuations that will come in the future.
Got it. So that's a little insight into Macro's roadmap then, at least the first part. No, cool. I'll do one more and then I'll get you guys out of here. We have some media and some brand executives on listening in, right? In this environment and just kind of thinking ahead, what piece of advice would you offer to them?
Wow. In the context of rising up, or the context of
in the context of we're in a new normal, and we're still figuring out what the actual normal will be, right? What advice would you give them in terms of navigating and being innovative during this time?
Look, I go back to, my original start in finance, which is risk is correlated with return. So I would say in times of chaos and upheaval, what's so inspiring about this conversation and frankly, what you're doing, Marlon, is take risks. That would be the biggest thing. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got, so I can't say it's mine, I have to tell you, I literally plagiarized it, was where on your resume does it list the jobs you don't get or the projects that failed? And so too many times, we're reluctant to invest in this next thing or go after this new opportunity or, so forth and so on, because we're worried, well, how would that look both to ourselves and to other people? And I tell you that the truth of the matter is life is far more set up for you to be risk tolerant than risk averse. So, no matter how many things you've invested in that haven't worked, I know you for the things that do work. And I know you for the externalities around that. Same thing with everyone else on the panel. Charles and I have known each other a long time, and candidly, I can tell you, the risks that seem so obvious to people now looking in retrospect, I remember when he was making those decisions. And so my biggest advice is go for it. The best predictor of future performance is what? Past behavior. So at the end of the day, anybody that's listening to us, anybody that's on this panel probably doesn't have a history of messing up too much. So why would we think that it would be any different in the future? So my thing is just roll that dice and see what happens.
All right. Sheenie, Charles?
I would have to agree. I think, honestly, I was going to say something similar in that people are going to have to let go of the old ways. They're going to have to adapt. They're going to have to be somewhat fearless and rethink, because otherwise they'll be irrelevant. things are changing at such a rapid pace, but changing in such big ways. It's not little things like now, instead of broadcast, we have cable and we have extra channels. It is changing in ways we can't even comprehend. And to have to keep up with that in 5 years, like, get ahead of it. Think about where it's going. Don't try to catch up in the end.
I would completely agree with what they both said, and the other thing I would add is, and I just think back to those conversations that Steve and I would have through the years, and the ones we have now, Marlon as well, is also think about your holistic self and what inspires you, and bring that into. So, like, Steve is a brilliant finance executive, but his understanding of culture in the world, and look at what's behind him. He's got DJ equipment right there. It's like he's literally in the perfect position. Like, I look at what you're doing now at Parkwood, and I think back to the corporate days when you were, but it trained you for this. But it's like your full holistic self, and you're bringing that into this incredible experience of this business that you're building. And I would just say for those executives to think ahead for the future while bringing like what you're passionate about and your heart into it. And like when those things combine together, and that's when like worlds change. So
yeah, and can I ask? Say one last thing, Marlon.
Yeah.
Because Charles really rang a bell, man, and it's just first of all, it's amazing, Charles, that we even blessed to be here together, brother. But I often hear this phrase, "Bet on yourself." And I talk to a lot of younger people about it. And the only modification I would have to that, and it's just one person's experience, I would say, let's not bet on ourselves, but bet on your circle, right? Betting on yourself is great, and you should always believe in yourself. I wouldn't necessarily bet on myself all the time, but I would put a lot of money down on my circle. And so being your authentic self is a lot of what Charles is alluded to. I can tell you personally, for me, comes because of the circle. So if it wasn't for Miss Tina, right? If it wasn't for B, if it wasn't for Charles, frankly, Marlon, if it wasn't for you, a lot of the people in my circle, I say, well, as a team, one-on-one, I might not be able to take you, but you give me a chance to pick my four that I'm starting with. I don't think you want to bet against me on that. And so I think particularly in this time, as the world is showing us, we got to stay inside, but it doesn't mean you have to stay solo. Get your squad, get your circle. And when you got a tight circle of people like Charles who could call me up and pull my coattails and say, no, bro, go a little to the left of this. And I know it's coming from love because wait a minute, I'm feeding off of him. He knows better than me in this, and vice versa. That's when you see, we couldn't envision. I had no idea what I would be doing in 2020. I had no idea what Charles would be doing in 2020. But I can tell you, in 2005, I absolutely looked at him and knew 2020 would be prosperous.
Same here.
And I wish, and by the way, I'd rather be lucky than good, but I would be lying if I didn't tell you that he's exactly where I thought he would be, not in terms of the exact position, but the exact power. So again, I bet on this panel and I bet on us collectively regardless.
That's right. Amen.
And my next thing is to break into the circle.
No, you're in the circle.
You're in the circle.
You're in the circle. And by the way, I believe that because we all brought, together. Everybody's 1 degree removed from everyone else. You've been in the circle and you didn't even know it. So that's why I said we have to treat each other like that because this is a relationship business. Yes. And if you don't have the right relationships within your circle, it's going to be hard to expand that circle. So I tell everybody, you ain't got to have a lot of people. Just make sure the people you got, you're really tight with and you're cool.
That's true.
That's well said. We all go up together, right? It's the only way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we are just at time, and I know you all are very, very busy people. So I'm going to thank you on behalf of Mac Venture Capital and the Founder Salon. Thanks for volunteering your time and all of the amazing advice and insight that you provided today. Can't say thank you enough.
Thank you, my brother.
Thank you for having me.
And thank all the founders too.
Yep, and to our audience, thank you for joining us. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, you too.
All right, guys. Peace.